Welcome to Light Church Online. Thank you for joining us for today's message.
So we look at Genesis chapter 50, and there's one verse that we've been looking at, and that's verse 20. As we look at that verse, it's important that we learn to refocus on not what is actually happening to us, but who is actually bringing us to a specific place. Of course, that purpose is God. That person is God. And if nobody ever told you, you need to be told that God had you born during a specific time for a specific reason to accomplish something specific. If nobody ever told you, you are not just here by accident. And so often we look at our lives and the things that happen to us as though they were accidental. There are some things that God, in his great plan and purpose for us, actually intended to happen, though from our perspective it may look like it was something bad. But as we'll see in today's text, that what we perceive as something bad, God intended it to happen so that something good would be the result. Now, if there's one thing I am learning, I have learned, and will continue to learn, is that when the Bible says, and he says that in Isaiah chapter 55, I don't think like you think. You better settle that. We do not think like God thinks. That's obvious in what happens to us. Because if we were doing things, certainly we would do things differently. But you have to understand that our knowledge of things is so shallow. And that our vision is so limited. For example, when you're driving down the street, your ability to see is limited to a certain distance, right? I'm sure if you had seen there was an accident further down the highway, you would have taken a different route. Right? But you didn't. You could only see a couple of miles ahead. And so that's the way our lives are. God has given us the ability to see just a little bit ahead. But when we relate to God, we can't relate to him successfully solely on the basis of what these are telling us. So we have to do what the Bible says, walk by faith. Faith is that extra sense that tells us whatever we see with these does not impair or stop what we should be seeing with these. What we should be seeing in here. You follow what I'm saying? So your life right now may look like, man, I just don't get it. I'm tithing. See what I'm talking about? See, I just saw that differently. I just saw when I said I'm tithing, I knew somebody was going to tell. That's right, Pastor. And y'all just went silent on me right there, boy. See, but I'm seeing through the eyes of my faith. Okay, but you say I'm doing what I think is right. I'm doing what I know is right. I'm doing that, and yet what these are telling me It just doesn't seem to measure up. It doesn't add up. But God and his purpose and plan is different from how we see things. Okay? So when we look at Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, there is a revelation there that I don't want you to miss. So I'm believing you'll catch it so that it'll help you refocus. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. We've looked at it for several weeks now. It's Joseph's statement to his brothers. But as for you, this is Joseph talking to his brothers, and of course you realize that his brothers are who God used to get him to Egypt. But how did they get him to Egypt? They sold him into slavery. All right. Now, I don't know. Who was that say you can reach me by trailways? Okay. I don't know. I do know, and we'll see it in a minute, that God intended for him to be in Egypt. You understand that? But what we get hung up on is how. Because for God to get us someplace, in our minds, we have this notion that it ought to be this way. You got it? In fact, over in the discovery class this morning, in talking about our experiences with the Lord, one of the participants reminded us that, when we ask God for patience, we need more patience. Well, in our thinking, the way he gives us patience, y'all know, either you come to the altar and get hands laid on you, and all of a sudden you got patience. No, that's not how he's going to get it to you. Okay, now how he's going to get it to you is he's going to put people around you. What do you say? They're going to get on not the first one you got. They're going to get on your last nerve. And so in our thinking, God, why are these people bugging me? Well, you asked for more patience. So what did you think was supposed to happen? Right? You ask God, Lord, I need more money. In our mind, you know what that means. Lotto, sweepstakes. No, that's Las Vegas. That ain't heaven. Okay. We look for the mailbox, check in the mail. Right? But in God's mind, to get you more money is going to require you having to learn to discipline yourself so that you will have more. We think the more is going to come from, the windows of heaven. And that's true. We just don't know where them windows are. We looking there, and that ain't where the windows are. No, Jesus said the kingdom is within you. So if the windows are in heaven and the kingdom is within us, guess where the open windows are? Yeah, see, so we looking for God to rain it down. Ain't that who was that? Kirk Franklin said? Rain down on us. We stand around looking, God, where's the money? Show me the money. And God's trying to show you the money. Guess where it is? It's in you. And so that means that he's going to send you to school. See, look at it. Some of y'all say it. and teach you how to refine and develop gifts and skills that he put in you that will translate into the money you say you want. So here it is, Joseph has to get to Egypt. Now, the reason he has to get to Egypt is because at that time, Egypt was the place. When you look at the world as it was then, whenever things went wrong, if you could get to Egypt, you could make it. And then you go back to where you were. Because the economy in Egypt it's much like, how people think about America. Okay? They think that if I get to America, all my troubles will be over. No, that's heaven. That ain't America. I think I ought to remind you of that. No, you come to America and you just get to switch. You get to switch problems. You don't eliminate them. But a lot of people think if I get to America, then I can make it. Right? Y'all haven't heard that? Oh, okay, yeah, okay. If you hang around people that haven't been over here, that's what they think. If I can get there. Now, maybe that might not be your experience. You might think, shoot, if I can leave America, well, go ahead on. Go ahead on and send me a postcard. Let me know. But that's what Egypt was at the time. And so the Bible says, and we've looked at it before, God called for a famine. The reason he called for the famine had to do with the fact that he needed Joseph in Egypt, but he didn't need Joseph in prison. He needed Joseph in a position of power and influence. But in order to get there, Joseph had to go through prison. Y'all still there? All right. And so it all starts, you heard of the domino theory? It all started with the hatred of his brothers. Which when we look at, we say that was bad, man. That shouldn't have happened to him. Why would his brothers treat him that way? But when we look at it from God's perspective, God who knows all about us, he knows what's going to happen to us. He knows those that are bent toward trying to harm us. And so since he knows that's why, man, I just don't understand people who don't have a relationship with him. Because he knows, okay, now they gonna hate on him, and I can use their hate to help them get to where I need them to be. You got it? And so if you don't learn to develop trust in God, you keep your focus on the haters instead of keeping your focus on the one who can use the haters. So Joseph said to his brothers, as for you, you meant evil against me. So in their minds, his brothers, now we've talked about it, man, if you miss and disciple you on Wednesday nights, I'm telling you, this is the wrong time for you to be skipping Bible study. If I'm you, I'm rearranging my schedule, if at all possible. I realize it's not always possible because of jobs and everything, but if at all possible, I'm rearranging my schedule to get in those Wednesday night sessions for the rest of this year. It is just that important. Because one of the things we learned is that our adversary, and God knows that, wants to use not folks that don't know you. Why would the devil want to use somebody you don't care anything about? Right? I mean, they talk about you. What difference does it make to you? I don't know them. They don't know me like that. But somebody close to you. a spouse, a child, a husband, a parent, a friend, another Christian brother or sister, a pastor, a member. I just paid their light bill, and they're going to treat me like this? Why would the devil use somebody that's not close to us? So that's one of the keys that we are learning on Wednesdays. Joseph is not talking to strangers. He's talking to his brothers. He says, you meant. Now, wait a minute. Is it possible, those of you who have siblings, you know what a sibling is? All right. That's not an alcoholic beverage. I said that one time at a church. I said, siblings. And after church, a guy came up to me and said, what brand of that? I said, huh? He said, you mentioned the brand. I was trying to follow the message. You mentioned the brand. I said, brand? He said, was it sibling, something? So I said, sibling? Yeah. What brand is that? I told the pastor, get me out. This brother got a whole lot of issues. But anyway, his siblings, those of you who have siblings, think now, do they actually mean evil against you? Could it be possible that some of you have had brothers and sisters who meant evil against you? Oh, my Lord. I see more heads than I kiss him. I didn't grow up with those kind, but I have heard that there are families like that. All right, Joseph was one, and so there are a lot of questions. Man, we can't exhaust this text, but there are things that you need to understand. One reason I keep wrestling with this text is because if God knew that that's the kind of brothers that he had, why would God select Joseph? You would have thought he'd have used somebody whose family was not jacked up. Right? But then that's how we think. That if God's going to use somebody, it's got to be somebody that got all their ducks in a row. Everything's lined up. Everybody's just lovey-dovey. Everybody gets along. The family reunion is just heaven on earth. Instead of guns and roses. you know, at most family reunions, I have yet to see one, and you might come from one. I just don't know it. Most family reunions, somebody going to get cussed out. Somebody going to start swinging. You know, they're going to have to get Uncle Bubba somewhere to call the police, just get him out of here. Something. These brothers meant evil against Joseph. But Joseph says, God meant it for good. So we're going to have to refocus our attention, not on what the brothers meant, but on what God meant. Now, like I told you, you ask God for more faith, you don't get that here at the altar. You understand? How many of you, I hesitate to ask, how many of y'all would like to be physically stronger? There's a few of y'all. The rest of y'all waiting to see what I'm coming back with. The rest of y'all ain't finna say nothing, y'all. I'm gonna wait and see where you're going with this. Okay. All right. Well, I found out that to get physically stronger, you're gonna have to put resistance against the muscles that you got. You got it? It ain't something you can eat. They can't give you a pill. You got to put resistance if you're going to get more muscles, if you're going to get stronger. All right? And so when we ask God for more faith, We think it's a matter of, him pouring it into us. No, it's a matter of you reading the word, faith comes by hearing, and then having the opportunity to practice what you have received. Because Jesus said, if you know these things, happy are you, not for knowing, but happy are you if you do them. So you want more faith? Get in the word and then practice what the word is telling you. How do I know that's true? Remember the disciples, Jesus was talking about forgiveness. And Jesus said, no, we ain't talking about forgiving them 7 times. Because you know how people think. Lord said, I got to forgive you 7 times. You up to number 4. All right. Like the 7th time, okay, that's it. That's all I got. No, Jesus said 70. In other words, you have to forgive them. Period. And they said, Lord, increase our faith. And Jesus went on to tell them how they were to increase it. And it had nothing to do with him praying for them. It didn't have anything to do with him laying hands on them. Faith. Oh, Shana, there it is right there. Faith. No, it didn't have nothing to do with that. Y'all be serious. Now I'm trying to get through this. It's one of them Sundays, ain't it? Okay. All right. So we have to keep our focus on what God meant instead of what our haters meant, even those that are close to us. But this is what I'm trying to get to. He says God meant it for good in order to bring it about as it is this day, the day he's talking to his brothers, to save many people alive. Now, we get bogged down in God's process instead of his purpose. Now, let me tell you that each and every one of you, I don't care who you are, I don't care what your background is, I don't care what your failures may have been, or for that matter, your successes. God has never retreated nor retracted his plan or his purpose for your life. And that always includes, listen to me, that always includes touching a whole lot of people. And here in this text, the New Living Translation says, he brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. And so what we have a tendency to do is become so self-focused and self-centered that all we can think about is what's happening to us. But what we're going to have to learn to do is shift from what's happening to us to who it is God is preparing us to serve, to give, to minister to. Now, if Joseph was called by God to save, get this, not just a lot of people, but save the very people that sold him. What kind of a developmental process do you think that had to take? To get you from hating on those that hated on you, or having any kind of spite or ill will toward those that sold you. Bring you from that place to where you are where Joseph is right now. To say, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good so that I could save your life. Go to Genesis chapter 45. But only God, that's why he's God. Only God could do that. God could use the very person that you crucify to save you. My God. Genesis chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph couldn't restrain himself before all of those who stood by him. And he cried out, make everyone go out from me. So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to who? His brothers, because they didn't recognize him because it had been such a long time. When they sold him, he was just a teenager. Okay? Verse 2, he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh, what? So does this sound like he was just kind of... Does that sound like that? No, it said everybody in the house heard him. This brother was toe up. Do you understand that? Okay. And he wasn't toe up because of what his brothers had done to him. He was, y'all understand toe up? Okay. He was toe up because God had brought him to a place where he recognized, even though they did what they did, he loved them so much. And he was now in a position, out of all the people that Joseph had helped because of his position in Egypt. Think of it. He didn't just help his brothers. He helped the whole nation of Egypt and others that came to Egypt to survive the famine. He helped them. But out of all the people that he helped, we are never told that Joseph broke down and wept aloud until he's standing before his brothers. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? But his brothers could not answer him. Well, imagine not. You know, I mean, you know, Joseph, you can imagine. Can you just picture this scene? Joseph sends everybody out. They still don't know who he is. And his brother's standing there shivering. And then this brother in this prominent position. I mean, think of it. What would you think if the mayor called you into his office? And you standing there, man, okay. And then the mayor asked everybody to leave but you. And then just start boo-hooing and breaking down and crying and hollering and screaming so that everybody could hear him. What would be going through your mind? Let's see, where's the nearest exit? You can imagine. And then for Joseph to say, I am Joseph. What do you say behind that? So his brothers are speechless. They couldn't answer him. Which indicates to me now that not only had there been a work done in Joseph, that at that point God has completed a work that he was doing in them. Because before they had this conversation, you know, they were trying to figure out, oh man, we can't go back and tell old man that Benjamin is gone. Man, I mean, you know, we broke his heart over the news of Joseph. So they were already dealing with that. And now here Joseph stands before them. And they are speechless. Well, they wasn't speechless when they sold it. Right? I mean, your haters ain't never speechless when they hating on you. Now they're at this point where they can't say nothing. Now, what would you have done if you'd have been Joseph? Yeah, you probably would have flipped off, how you like me now? Yeah, See, I told y'all. This brother is toe up because he realizes that he is right where God wanted him all along, and that he used his brothers, who he perceived as hating on him, to get him there. So he says, verse 4, please come near me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now, don't be grieved or angry with yourselves. Wow. You have come full circle. Now you're providing comfort. You are reconciling those that did evil against you. You're talking about being Christ-like. For God, come on, God sent me before you. Wait a minute, I thought he was sold. Isn't that what happened? He was sold, and he says, God sent me. See, we get bogged down into the how instead of the purpose of God. God wanted me in Egypt, and so you thought you were doing me a disservice. God knew how you were thinking, so he used how you thought to get me here. All right. In fact, you can really look at it as though his brothers paid his way. Right? Either way, he got to Egypt, didn't he? God sent me, verse 7, before you to preserve a posterity for you. You who? Is he still talking to his brothers? The ones that sold him? You mean to tell me they sold him, but God used that to save them? My goodness. Does that sound anywhere close to some things that may have happened to you? People mistreated you, and you were hating back, and probably because you hated back, you delayed your own progress. Because until you get that hate out of you, you cannot accomplish God's purpose. What was God's purpose for Joseph? He just told us. What was it? That's right, to save lives, not destroy them. Well, if he had hate in him, would he have saved lives? Person that bullied you, person that walked out on you, the person that got your daughter pregnant, the person that misused your son, the man you fell in love with and swore that would be your husband to the day you die, only to get a note, a phone call, or somehow or another be told that he has betrayed your trust. Could that be the very person God saying, I'm going to send you back to him? Now, that don't necessarily mean he's going to make you marry him again. I'm not saying that. Okay? But see, you subject to end up in a ministry where that person you got to minister to. What's going to happen when you the minister in the prayer line and you praying for, Lord bless so and so. Help me, Jesus. Because you ready to. Now, I wonder, are you still going to be affected by what they did to you? Or has God been able to get you to a place where you forget about that and focus on what he is doing through you and in you? Now, this, folks, is not an overnight process. Stop expecting it to happen in 3 easy lessons and 2 CDs. I got 3 CDs, Pastor. I got this. Oh, is that right? Well, we're going to find out. Remember I told you if you want patience, how's it going to come? Huh? Yeah, it ain't going to come at the altar. God's got to give you some people that are going to strengthen and develop your patience. People you're going to have to long suffer with. Long suffer. Long suffer. All right. Yeah. You're going to have to learn to long suffer. So this ain't a short 2-day quiz. And now you have passed and you got patience. No, Joseph's time of development was not in a week or a month. He had been gone so long, his brothers. Now tell me, how long do you have to be before you see a sibling and don't recognize that's who they are? You might not want to recognize it. But from a teenager to the next time he got to tell you, this is who I am, because you don't recognize him? How long is that? So stop expecting God to put you on the fast track to all that he's got planned for you. No, what you need to do is settle down and realize that God is taking me somewhere. And all that I am going through is not outside of his observation. And so, he knows exactly what it is and who it is. He knows what their motivation is. And if he doesn't stop it, it's a testimony to him, number one, about what he knows is in you that he's going to get out. Because you may never have developed that before. And so he may let you stay in there for a while until you develop some more of it. You got it? But he knows it's in you because the Bible says he's faithful. He doesn't allow you to be tempted beyond your ability to withstand it. You got it? And so if he is allowing it, he knows it's in them. Now here's where your confidence in him has to grow. If God allows it, he knows that it's in you because he's the one that created you. And can I tell you something you probably hadn't even thought about? There are things that are in you you don't even know. But he does because he put them in there. And if you don't know they're in there, how would you ever know to develop them? But since he knows how to bring them out. So stop telling people, I just don't think I can take no more. Oh yeah, you can. If he lets you, if he allows it, you can take some more. So Joseph says, God sent me here. Verse 8, so now, in fact, verse 7 says, he sent me here to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives. Let me close by this. Because this is where our thinking has got to change. Whoever you are, I mean, you look at your life right now and think, it's all about you, your career, you getting over. And that's not it at all. I got to get me a job. I'm going to school to get me a degree so I can get me a job. I can make my money. That ain't about it at all. He says, God brought me here to preserve the lives of a whole lot of others, including you. So all that God allows for us to go through so that we may develop is intended to prepare us so that we are able to serve, to give, to preserve, not us, but others. And even though it's painful, it's uncomfortable. Let me tell you something for you hoppers. You know what a hopper is. When it gets painful, they just hop. Gets painful over there, they just hop. Uncomfortable, they just hop. Let me tell you something about hoppers. They never get developed. Never get developed. Because by the time the oil gets hot, yeah, they done popped out, and they never get developed. Your Father knows exactly where he put you. Oh, God sent me here to this church. Did he really? Oh, yeah, there ain't no other church like this. I know I've been sent here. Is that right? Where were you Sunday? Man, I don't like so-and-so. I don't like the way they do so-and-so. Oh, but God sent you. Why are you serving? Well, I went to the meeting and, they didn't let me do nothing. So you just hopped out. Because you thought you were just supposed to walk in. Here I am. Thank God he didn't let me loose on y'all when I first went into the ministry. In the church I grew up in, a Baptist church, Mount Pisgah, North Dallas, we had Sister Roxy Washington. She was one of the oldest ladies of the church. And Sister Roxy had me thinking I was the greatest preacher since Billy Graham. Because I would preach and Sister Roxy would sit right there on the end of the pew. Preach, baby. Preach. Preach, baby. Lord help him. Lord help him. Every time I preach, which was about 3 times a year. And she had me thinking, I was the greatest thing. She was such an encouragement to me. And it wasn't until years I found out. Sister Roxy knew that boy needed to go to school. He needed to learn some scriptures. I jumbled it all up. I was calling one thing this and, trying to impress people. The Bible say. And one time I was called. I told you I didn't preach but maybe 3 times a year. And so in one of them messages I said something. I said, it says in so-and-so and so. Well, I've had some people in that church that, now you said that this says, that ain't what that say. Did you just miss? Where is that? I got on the plane, Mackenzie. I was in college in Houston, Texas Southern University. Got on the plane coming home from Houston on vacation, Thanksgiving vacation. I had my preacher stuff on. I'm Reverend Ram Shaw. I get on the plane. I sit down. It ain't but like a dozen or so people on the plane. I sit there with my Bible. The stewardess comes up to me. I never will forget it. She said, "You're a minister, right?" "Yes." I'm just telling you what happened. I said, "Yes." She said, "There's a little girl back here that's trying to find the Lord's Prayer. Tell me, can you tell her where that is?" "Yes." I looked for that scripture all the way to Dallas. I never did find that scripture. By the time we got to Dallas, I had yanked my coat and tie off and all that, and I got on up out of that plane. I was so embarrassed. How you gonna be a preacher and not know what the Lord's Prayer is? So I thank God he didn't turn me loose on people. He gave me time to work all that foolishness out. I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm Reverend so I'm Bishop so-and-so. Get all that nonsense. Y'all think pastor, boy. And they let him be the pastor. I'm just telling you that this doesn't happen in a few easy lessons. But once you realize, I don't care who you are, look at the person next to you. See, to you, they may just look like somebody that, no, okay, I'll go to church with them, you know. Yeah, okay, I guess they're all right. I don't know them. But God's working something out that's going to affect a lot of people. And just because he hasn't disclosed it to you doesn't mean that it's illegitimate. And Joseph says, this is the reason. Now, how God does what he does is not up for us to discuss with him. Lord, this is the way you're going to have to develop me. See, that's Burger King. That ain't heaven. No, this is the way you're going to fix my hamburger right here, just like this. Don't put the onesies on that. That's not the way God does things. And the reason he doesn't is because you don't know what's in you. He does. Okay? And there are stories upon top of stories where what we may have considered tragedy or calamity that turned out to be stories where God protected, God preserved, and God provided. I told a story this morning, one that I received when I was in Sherman by a woman that kind of adopted us, me and Vita, when we were there. She was from Cleveland, Tennessee. And she had a brother and a sister, and her mom was their caregiver. The winters of Cleveland, Tennessee, she said, were very harsh sometimes. And in that part of the country, you know, they didn't have what we had down here in the South in terms of method of heating their homes. They used coal to heat their homes. And this particular winter, they were out of coal. And her mom, who was a Christian, a praying woman, a believing woman, was concerned about how am I going to keep my babies from freezing to death in this drafty, broken down house. She didn't have money to buy the sack of coal that was needed. And this woman tells me that her mom had just prayed. And when she got up off of her knees, she heard all of this commotion going on in their backyard. There was a guy that had done something that the police were after him about. Sirens blazing. And she said her mom told her, y'all stay right here. And left them in there, I think it's 2-bedroom house, 2-room house, something like that. The mom goes out, steps on the back porch, and there's this guy running that hops over their back fence. He's carrying a sack, but in order to get over the fence and get away from the police, he drops the sack. Runs on down the street. The mom goes out and picks the sack up, and much to her amazement, guess what it is? It's a sack of coal. She goes back in, she gets the house warm, and this woman tells us her mom said to her and to her sister and brother, God sent it, even if he made the devil drop it off. Who are we to demand from God? You got to work this way. What we should do, again, is not concentrate on what's happening to us, but whose we are and who we trust in. Stand with me.
Life is a race, but you don't have to run it alone. Take advantage of your help. Receive Jesus today, and He will help you with everything you're going through. God has a plan for you. The first step in that plan is salvation. Read Romans 10:9 and pray this prayer of salvation. God in heaven, I believe in my heart you raised Jesus from the dead. I confess with my mouth, Jesus is Lord. Jesus, I call on you now for my eternal salvation. I receive forgiveness for all my sin. I accept your unconditional love. Thank you for receiving me. I submit myself to you. With you as my helper, I will live according to your plan the rest of my life. Amen. If you are blessed by today's message, we encourage you to give an offering. Simply click the Give Online link on the Light Church homepage. Thank you for tuning in this week. We look forward to you joining us during our next broadcast. Have a blessed week.